A plan is not a strategy. In 2020, a $200 million company came to me and asked for help with strategic planning. So we worked on it together. We built a strategy out for them and a basic plan that they would follow. And then about a month later, COVID came and the world shut down. They met with me again to try to figure out, what do we need to do to adapt to COVID? How do things need to change? How are we going to move forward? And one of the conclusions that we came to as we worked through this together is that the strategy was robust. The strategy that they had developed pre-COVID was valid all the way through the COVID unknowns that we had to figure out. On the other hand, their plan needed to change a little bit. We had to deal with safety issues that you didn't need to deal with before. There were logistical complications that didn't exist before. Mostly at that time, there was just unknowns. If you remember, nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody knew what was going on. And so we adjusted the plan to accommodate for those things, but the strategy stayed the same. And so if you're a leader of an organization, the ability to recognize the difference between a strategy and a plan is a very useful tool, because it allows you to know what needs to stay the same, what's resilient, what can handle changes, and what part of the planning work that you've done can change. Because we use the terms strategic planning, I think many leaders have conflated the idea that it's all the same thing, that strategy and a plan are the same concepts. And that's probably a fault to a large degree of consultants like myself who have not differentiated between the two enough. Really, what strategy is it's a framework for decision making. And to make it simple, it only really needs to cover three basic components: your values, the vision, and priorities. Your values, people use the terms value statements or core values. These are core concepts that you have that define what is appropriate decisions to make and appropriate ways to behave within your organization. So if you identify integrity as a value in your organization, that's a common one for many companies, then that helps you understand that within this organization, when we make decisions, they should be decisions that are made with integrity, and that the behaviors we have, the way we handle situations, even difficult situations, should be done with integrity. They help guide behavior. They provide a framework for how you make decisions and how you act. Vision tells you the direction that you're trying to go, what you're trying to accomplish. Vision is the future that you're trying to build. Between these two, values and vision, you have a sense of what you're trying to build as a company, what you're trying to accomplish, and then the values or the ways that you make decisions and act on the way to building your vision. Priorities are the major things that you need to accomplish if you're going to make progress towards your vision. Some people call them big rocks. There's a lot of terms that people use to call these. But the idea around priorities is typically there's 3 to 5. That's the number I find is the most useful to work with. 3 to 5 major accomplishments that if you accomplish those, you'll make substantive gains towards accomplishing your vision. So let's say you want to grow your company out in a particular way over the next 5 years. That's your vision. And maybe you want to become leaders in a certain segment of your marketplace. And maybe you want to become an employer of choice. So these are ingredients of your vision. So some of the priorities then over the next year, for example, might be things that you want to do to accomplish any one of those aspects of your vision. All of these work together to provide or to create your strategy. What this means is when there's a new opportunity, a new shiny object on the horizon of something that you could be doing, you can think, does that opportunity move us towards our vision, or does it distract us from it? Does it help us accomplish one of our priorities, or does it divert energy away from one of those priorities? And in pursuing that, is it in alignment with our values? Do we have, are we maintaining integrity in terms of how we relate to our values in this process? At a minimum, nothing we do should violate our values or violate or prevent us from moving towards our vision. That's at a minimum. Ideally, any activity we're engaged in as a company should somehow demonstrate one or more of our values, and it should somehow make it easier for us to accomplish our vision or move us towards our vision. That's strategy. It's very, very simple. And so if you write it on a piece of paper, it should be able to fit on the top half of the piece of paper. It should be something that people can easily see, easily remember. Even if they don't memorize it word for word, they should be able to know the concepts of your strategy pretty easily. And anybody in your company, from the top to the bottom, should be able to use your strategic framework of your values, vision, and priorities to speed up decision making and improve alignment amongst or across the organization. That's strategy. Your plan is the step-by-step process that you're going to use to accomplish your strategy and to stay in alignment with your strategy. The difference between the two is the values, vision, and priorities tend to be very robust. They don't tend to change very easily. But your plan, the specific steps that you're going to take to try to accomplish your priorities, to live into your vision, to manifest your values, this could meet unanticipated obstacles along the way, like COVID. This could meet opportunities along the way that really need thinking about, and maybe you need to consider those. There's all sorts of scenarios that could happen that can disrupt your plan. The old saying goes that everyone has a plan. I think it's a Mike Tyson saying that everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. It's kind of like that in life. Everyone has a plan until something happens and it knocks you back a little bit. But your strategy should stay the same. And so even a good fighter, I practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If you have a plan and you go into a fight, you're going to find out right away that it's impossible to plan, or it's nearly impossible to plan out how a fight's going to go. If you're working with a very inexperienced opponent, you might be able to do that. But generally, there's a lot of things happening that you can't control and that you can't just make happen go the way you can't make things go the way you want to go. On the other hand, you can and you should go into a match, at least once you become more experienced, but even newbies that are learning, as you go into a match or into a fight, you want to be able to go in with your strategy of, this is how I conduct myself. These are my values. This is how I want to treat people. This is my vision for what I want to accomplish, what I want to learn, what I want to practice, what I want to do in this match. And these are a couple of the priorities that I'm going to try to bring to bear when I do this. It might be, I just want to be able to learn to try to move into this position with this kind of an opponent who has, who's bigger than me. And so it can be as simple as that, is my strategy, which guides how I handle all of the random circumstances that could occur in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match. Same thing in business, same thing with any kind of organization that you lead. Your guiding strategy allows you to maintain your course even when things go off track, whereas plans frequently need to be updated. Now, this is not a dismissal of planning. Planning is very, very important, particularly for two reasons. One is it provides an opportunity for everybody who's involved in the planning to use it as a thought experiment, to think through what would it really take for us to accomplish these priorities. If we're going to do this, what steps will we realistically need to take? And so if you're trying to grow a company, for example, it can help you think of, okay, we're going to need this many more staffing, and if we have this many more staffing, we're going to need this many more square footage, or we're going to start working remotely, and if we're going to work remotely, we're going to have to adapt into a new management structure, et cetera, and you can start thinking through what will be required for us to be successful in these priorities, pursuing this vision. If you don't think through those things in advance, you often find yourself stuck or lost or dealing with anticipatable but yet unanticipated consequences. And so planning is a process by which you can think through various scenarios and your approaches to meet them. That's one value of planning. The other important value of planning is that it allows you a method or a simple tool to communicate the expected steps to people throughout the company. So for example, I was working with a client. When I started working with them, they were doing about 45 million in revenue. And then over the course of 2 years, they had grown to 65, and they had grown quite a bit. And there was a lot of activity going on. One of the challenges they had is they had a very, very flat structure in the organization, and the owner of the company ran and pretty much everybody directly reported. Everybody that wasn't providing direct services to the customer reported to him. So he had a lot of direct reports, and he was overwhelmed. He was maxed out. He had never done planning like this before because plans change, so he didn't see the point of it. And what I communicated to him, and this is important for you as well, is that when you have good plans in place, it allows you to communicate to your management team, these are the expectations. The strategy helps them understand how do you make decisions in the absence of information. But you also want to be able to say, but these are the expectations that I have. This is what I want you to accomplish over the next quarter, and this is the way that I want you to do that. And if as a group you develop that plan together, you have the buy-in, you have the benefit of a lot of minds putting themselves into creating a robust, useful plan. So my recommendation to you is to build a strategy for your organization, and this should be updated periodically. Once a year, I like to have my clients just review their strategy and make sure it makes sense. If they start making significant gains towards their vision, which they do, then we update the strategy as needed. Or if something dramatically changes in the environment, then maybe we update their strategy for that. But most of the time, this doesn't need to get changed very often. On the other hand, plans, when I work with clients, we intentionally review the plans at least quarterly. Sometimes they need to be reviewed more frequently. And it's because, they don't usually need major changes to them, but you just realize as you start working on things, there's challenges you didn't anticipate, or there's resources you thought were going to be there that aren't, or there's resources available that you didn't know you would have available, and so certain things can be approached at a different speed than you had thought previously, and that changes some of the plans. And that's okay, that's fine. The important thing is this. When you're building your strategy, you should be able to build it understanding that this allows for direction, but it also allows for flexibility in how you pursue that direction. It's a little bit like sailing. If you say we want to sail from here to there, it may be that wind will come up along the way. It may be that currents blow you in a particular way. But if you have got a good compass and you understand where you're going to go, your path may move around a little bit, but you'll still end up where you want it to end up. The strategy is similar to that. It guides you to where you want to go. The plan is the specific path that you intended to take. Things may or may not work out exactly like you planned, but when things go off course, you just adjust your plan. So that's my encouragement to you. Build a strategy that's robust, that you can use it frequently. You can go back and refer to it frequently. You can use it to create alignment amongst your team so that in the absence of information, in the absence of being able to know what to do, you have a framework for decision making that will work for anybody throughout your organization and any kind of function or department in your organization. But then also build plans, the specific steps, understanding that plans have to be or should be or at least open to being updated on a regular, consistent basis. The very worst thing, I think, is to walk into an organization that very proudly has this big, thick strategic plan that they've looked at twice in the last 5 years, and to recognize a lot of work went into this, and maybe even a lot of very good thought went into this, but because the plans weren't reviewed regularly and they weren't updated regularly, it's all sort of more of a historical document than anything that was practically useful in terms of moving the organization forward. So if you want more tips on leadership or organizational growth, make sure to subscribe here. Otherwise, stay tuned for more tips and thoughts around leadership and growing your organization.